Good morning, everybody. It's good to be back with you this morning, continuing our study. And I must confess that it'll be put on hold just for one Sunday. I've got some work I've got to do in Atlanta next week. And so I've got to leave Saturday. So I won't be with you next Sunday, but we will continue the next Sunday. And so hopefully won't have any interruptions after that. But wanted to give you fair warning on that. And I do believe Isaac is working on getting you a replacement. I don't know if it's going to be him or someone else, but you will have somebody up here next week. It just won't be me. So having said that, we're continuing on with our study. And again, I wanted, and up front, I did tell you that I would, again, go over a brief summation of what we've covered so far. And so in keeping my promise, can anybody tell me just what they remember about the cosmological argument? If you had to sum it up just in a sentence or a couple of words, can anybody tell me what that covers? It is a defense of Christianity, for sure. And I know you can't see it because I'm terrible with font sizes, but it says a ready defense right underneath that. So how is it a defense for Christianity? What's its main point? Right, exactly, cause and effect. So how can we use cause and effect as an effective tool for a defense? So say that again. Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's that line of thinking that's used in that argument that really can help us get down to the crux of the issue, that when the first thing that appeared, what was its cause? Because you can get into however long of a conversation you want about this, and somebody that knows a whole lot about biology can really explain in great detail what kind of cause created an effect. But if you keep asking this question, what caused this? Eventually you'll get down to, okay, what caused the Big Bang Theory for instance? There really isn't a great answer right now. And really what you get down to is, did nothing cause something, or did something that's always been cause something? So again, that's kind of the takeaway. That's the takeaway point. And you get somebody to think about the idea that, I'm already believing almost in a supernatural situation, because nature, by admission, again, what we covered first, had a beginning. So was its beginning supernatural? Yes. That's already outside the realm of science. But that was what the cosmological argument was. Then we went into the teleological argument, which was the fine-tuning argument. So give me just a little description of what that means, fine-tuning argument.
Placed in for us to exist.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When we look at the universe and in our system within the world and our bodies and how everything interacts, there's such a fine tuning to allow all of it to exist the way that it does, that if it were off in any one part in a very, very small amount, that it wouldn't exist this way. And so the logical thought behind this is, well, when we see order, what do we typically think? If we see scratches on the inside of a cave wall that roughly make out a man 5 lines with a little circle, we don't think that's random chance. We think that, oh, somebody's been here and they're trying to make cave drawings, right? That wasn't rocks falling that happened to just make a stick figure on the side of the wall. That's a very simple thing too. There's very little to it. So if we see the complexity that we see today, do we think that it came from an unguided and unmind, a process that did not have a mind with intelligence that would create such fine tuning for a universe? And that's that argument. And then last week we went over the moral argument. That one was a fun topic, was it not? Had a lot of discussion on that. So somebody kind of just give me a a glimpse of the moral argument. What did we cover last week?
Truth.
Did you say objective truth?
Yeah, objective truth.
Okay, why is that important?
Like you said, regardless of the subject and the input.
Right, we the subject, either morals or what we determine what is good or evil. Is it subjective, meaning you and I as a subject determine what the object is, good or bad? Or is the object itself outside of subject input good, or is it evil? Right? And I think we determined last week the easiest way to go about this, I think it's easier to convince someone that something is objectively evil rather than objectively good. And that poses kind of a problem for us at first a little bit, just because of where it naturally leads. But isn't it easier to say, hey, isn't it always wrong to fill in some horrible example? And I think most people will concede that ground that, yeah, that's always wrong. I don't care who you are. I don't care what any subject says about this. That's just wrong. Why is that important? Bias? Well, it's because of bias, maybe, that we think a certain way. But if you think a certain way about something and I think a certain way about something, and it's different, what makes your bias or opinion better than mine? And what makes mine better than yours? And really, at the end of the day, it depends on who has the power in the situation that can overpower another to enforce their will on someone else. But why is it important to establish either good or evil objectively in this instance? Exactly right. What's the standard? So again, if there's no overarching standard outside of humanity, then it's just us. It's up to us to determine what is good, what's wrong. And really, at the end of the day, there really is no right or wrong. It's just your opinion versus my opinion on what is right or wrong, and or what society's opinion is of what's right and wrong, that a society has determined what we follow. But again, we look to another society and they're diametrically opposed to ours. Which one's right? Well, are they both right or are they wrong? Again, what you come to find is that in the world where objective morals or objective good and bad doesn't exist, then really at the end of the day, there's no responsibility, true responsibility to act a certain way. Not really. You can't say that somebody that does some horrible thing is really wrong. That's just your opinion. Right? Now, when we get to that point, if we get to the point where we can say, hey, we've established this one action is always bad, no matter who it is that's done it, that's always bad. Where does that naturally lead? That naturally leads to the problem of evil for us as Christians, right? That's kind of where we, got to last week. Is that okay? That's fine. I give you the idea or the fact that there is actual evil in the world. Well, then your God created everything, right? Well, he created evil then. Where did we get to on that? Because we did. We resolved that, and you guys had answered it. What was the answer? Free will. Why is that so important? Why does that absolve God of creating evil? You have the choice. He created beings with the choice to choose his will or not his will, right? And the choosing of his will is following what is good, and choosing something besides his will is not. That's sin, missing the mark, evil, right? And that has obviously devolved in a whole lot of other versions of evil. But that's really, I wanted to go over that specifically because that leads perfectly into what we're discussing today. Because when you get to that point, most of the time, especially now, it's going to lead to this. I've got to use, these things are not connected. I've got to push two buttons. So, free will argument. Do we actually have free will? That's a question that you've got to answer for yourself, that you must ponder. And I guarantee you, if you go down the road with somebody, more and more people now may not actually prescribe the idea that you and I have free will, which is interesting. So I ask you the question, do we have free will?
Sure, yeah.
How do you know?
You may be like Paul, spend your life in prison, but you have the right to be a Christian.
Okay.
You have that free choice to be a Christian.
So you're saying that he had the free choice to give up on Christianity to get out of prison, but he chose to remain a Christian. Okay.
You
All right.
have that free will in your life. It's an old saying my grandfather said, everything you do in life is a choice except death. You don't have to pay your taxes. You may go to jail, but it's a choice. You have every choice in life except death. And how you spend your afterlife is your choice in this life.
Now, before I continue with what I'm going to say, I want to tell you that I agree with you. But I did hear, so you said that it says so in the Bible. Can you show me where it says that? And see, when we say that, and I'm not saying that we can't do that because I've got some scriptures we're going to get to today. But when we say that, we've got to be able to have in hand our explanation right there, because if we're left without the scripture that helps justify that, then, obviously that hurts us in the moment a little bit. But there would be a lot of people now, especially the leading atheists that I have mentioned quite often, that would say, actually, what you think you're talking about right there is free will, but that's actually an illusion. I don't know if you can actually see this or not. It's a little grainy, so I'm going to read it for you. Have a seat, Kermit. What I'm about to tell you might come as a shock. And if you can't see it, it's an X-ray of Kermit, and there's a hand, bones of hand in his X-ray. It's a pretty good little, illustration here. I think it's pretty funny. It's but it really kind of points to the idea that's really being believed by most thinkers, foremost thinkers that we have in society today, that Kermit he might think he's a real person, but really he's got somebody controlling every single move. He's determined nothing for himself, and we are the same way. We have determined nothing for ourselves because we are just matter, and we are a contingent cause, and we are an effect. Everything acts upon us, therefore it creates, even within our mind, the choices of the illusion of choice, but really it was determined from the get-go. And I want to go over a couple of things. So Richard Dawkins says this: most people who say they are an atheist believe in free will. And that is true. That is true. And that is a good angle to start with when you're actually talking about this. Most believe that they have free will. Because if you ask the question, like I asked you today, if you went up to any random person, most probably around here are going to say, well, yeah, I've got free will. But if they ascribe to being an atheist, this is what he has to say. Let's call them naive atheists, meaning they have not properly thought through where atheism really leads. Now that's interesting. What does he mean? Well, we're going to go over a few terms here. So, atheism, or the atheistic worldview, cannot support free will. Not really. Not in the way that you and I believe in free will would really be termed libertarian free will, if you looked it up, and that's how they term it, coined the term, I guess. But here are three terms that you'll run into that are counter beliefs or worldviews in the atheistic worldview. So naturalism, this is not a tree hugger that just loves nature. This is it's a philosophical belief that everything arises from natural properties and causes, and supernatural or spiritual explanations are excluded or discounted. Now, determinism, I'll get into determinism here in just a moment, but materialism is the doctrine that nothing exists except matter and its movements and modifications. And determinism is the ultimate term that really comes out of these two other terms that we were talking about. Materialism, again, I'm not talking about people that love stuff. It's the belief that the only objective reality is material, is matter, and that everything going into determinism is determined by matter and physics. So determinism is the doctrine that all events, including human action, are ultimately determined by causes external to the will. Some philosophers have taken determinism to imply that individual human beings have no free will and cannot be held morally responsible for their actions. Now, that's something we're going to reach just a little later, but that's where quite a few people are. And I want to show you just a few things that people in this position have said. Now, this actually goes back quite a bit. This person right here, I don't know if, has anybody actually heard of the German-French philosopher Baron de Holbach? That's okay. You know, I didn't really much until I started looking at this either, so don't feel bad. But
If he's a baron, he must be credible.
right, exactly. Thank you, appreciate that. But no, he actually lived back in the from mid to late 18th century, around 1770. He had a lot of work and had a lot of words about religious belief. But this is what he says about free will. The inward persuasion that we are free to do or not to do a thing is but a mere illusion. If we trace the true principle of our actions, we shall find that there are always necessary consequences of our volitions and desires, which are never in our power. You think yourself free because you do what you will, but are you free to will or not to will, to desire, not to desire? Are not your volitions and desires necessarily excited by objects or qualities totally dependent of you? Now, there's a lot packed into that statement right there. But I kind of want to unpack it by asking you a question. Did anybody have breakfast this morning? What did you have for breakfast? A shake. All right. Well, I'm already questioning your choices already. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Why did you choose a shake? Did you choose that? Okay. What makes you think that you made the decision? You just think that you have, right? It was voluntary. Okay. All right. So what were your other choices? What could you have chosen? So you had those at your disposal. Could have had a candy bar. You're talking about my kind of breakfast now. Right? Yes. Actually, I had a few of those last night. But as a thought experiment, but was it a choice? Because see, in your mind, in your brain, there were things telling you about that shake, about your other options that influenced your ultimate action to have the shake. Why did you not choose the waffle or the eggs? Was it going to be more inconvenient? Was it going to save time just to go with the shake? Is it a little more healthy to go with this shake over waffles and syrup?
Yes.
So in your brain, you had thoughts that led you down that pathway. The argument here is, and what Baron Holbach would say, and that he said in other words, is that just because we can't see what's going on in our brain activity really is what our mind, as we say it is, that's what's actually getting us to do what we're doing. It's electrical stimuli on our brains. Our neurons are firing, And really, it's micro stimulus that you have had over the course of your entire life that have led you and determined that you are going to have a shake today.
And he got a new blender.
Right. There's another influence. There's another outside influence that would help him make that action, but you didn't make the action yourself.
Well, wasn't it free will that made him go out to the grocery store to gather different ingredients to make the shake as far as?
Wasn't it the absence of having those ingredients that pushed him to do it?
Well, he wouldn't be able to have the shake if he didn't have the ingredients.
Right, exactly. But that was the influence. He didn't make that decision. Okay, I saw a hand.
So while I appreciate you being the devil's advocate, I can assure you that maybe I'm not the only one who gets frustrated with this type of conversation, because I feel like the answers are easy. And I feel like the opposition to the Bible is working super hard to have to create these types of, things that are going on in our brain that may not be choosing free will, that may not cause us to do free will. It's frustrating because I just feel like they're working extra hard to challenge us on something that I feel is just easy.
Sure, and it should be. But let me tell you exactly what they would say to that. And I don't mean this to you personally. I mean it to the statement. Science is hard. And if you don't want to look into science, you're taking the easy way out. And looking for the easy answer is what simpletons do.
Again, while I appreciate your just being devil's advocate.
And I didn't mean that to you personally. I have seen people say things like that. I've been a part of conversations where that it feels, well, it is pretty rude. But in their mind, they're saying, look, I'm just telling you the facts. I've done the math. I've done the science. It's all said and done. And the reason I subject you to this is because if you have this conversation, this is literally how it can go. And I'll get to you right now. If you go onto YouTube, I realize that most people that we're going to encounter are not going to be on the level of the people I'm talking about right now. I understand that. I really do. But who are they going and watching? If you go and you look at the YouTube channels of these other people, you see that they have millions and millions, tens of millions of views. People are gathering information from them as well. Right. They're also doing what we're doing. Just because we haven't run into that right now, there are people that are watching it and getting convinced. And I've had somebody look me in the eye with this sense of, well, this attitude of smug. I'm trying to find good words to say. They were very smug and confident in their worldview and said, wow, I pity you for believing what you believe. Why? And the reason I get down to the details with you is because we can. The answer is simple. You are correct. The answer is simple, but the explanation for some has to get down deep. Just has to. Because they don't understand the simple thing. I'm kind of the same way, I've got to admit. If you tell me a simple explanation for something, I need to know the nuts and bolts of how it works before I really understand how it works. Because at the end of the day, for those of you that you don't know, I'm actually a scientist by trade. I do science every single day at my work. I follow the scientific method at my work. And so for me, I can't take a simple, well, this is just how it is. That doesn't work in my report. That's not going to work in court. So for some, we have to have a little more detailed explanation for certain things.
Under this line of thinking.
Yes.
We have in the world, we see it throughout the world today. The accountability factor is gone. If you go
100%.
line of thinking, then somebody can go out, rob banks, steal, rape, whatever. And you know what? He didn't have a choice, right? Something steered him to do this. What it is, who knows? But ultimately, the accountability factor is gone. Morals are gone. Everything that stands for anything pure doesn't exist because we have no control of the choices we make.
Personal responsibility flies out the window when you don't have the ability to choose what to do. You're exactly right. And that is a simple concept. You're back there. You're exactly right. That is a simple concept. And I think if most people are honest with themselves, yeah, they initially believe in free will. They have convinced themselves not to believe in free will. And it does. And I think it was you that said the first day that a lot of the reasons why things have shifted so much is that people want to do what they want to do. People want to do what they want to do, morally speaking. Now, I know there are some people that follow the science that go down rabbit holes that lead them that way as well. What you were going to say?
I don't see this as science to begin with. This is philosophical, whimsical philosophical thought that, that's all over the place. Unfortunately, we do have the free will to believe it. I mean, people do believe it. It's nonsense. There's no authoritarianism here. These people aren't authority in anything necessarily than what they go to college and study, but there's no scientific proof in that, in what they're saying. It's all philosophical.
I 100% agree with you on that.
We shouldn't call them an authority. What's his name?
Richard Dawkins.
Richard Dawkins. He carries things off so far. You don't even. He's certainly no authority. He just wrote a few books. And why should we put so much worry about that? Why should we be so concerned about it? He's nonsense.
Well, Albert Einstein, what he did? Is he an authority?
Well, some would say that he is on the theory of general relativity. But
Almost calling into question, the reason why is because you're comparing the works of God to the capacity, the mental capacity of human beings, which we sometimes get haughty and we think ourselves intelligent. But when you're comparing the works of God, we're not.
we're a drop in the bucket, that's for sure. Hey, the way that I like to say this now, and I don't know why it took me so long to think of it, we're on a need-to-know basis.
Yeah, that's where accepting you come in as a little child. That's the kind of
Sure.
we've got to go to. We can't really say, well, I want to get up on your level to understand all the workings of.
Well, yeah, we want to. I mean, why do you think Eve ended up eating the tree of the fruit of good and evil? I mean, it was the allurement of being on the level of God and knowing what God knows. That's just human nature almost, I guess. Very, very true. And see, that's one thing that I want us to not necessarily forget. We'll definitely get to that in a moment. But I want to go back to what you said just a moment ago. No, it was good. It was a good thing because I want to point something out. I want to use the words of these folks, whether it is written in some of their writings or if this is a quote from them, where they were speaking in something, because it's important to hold them accountable to what they say. Because I want to get to Stephen Hawking and something he said. You're exactly right. This is a philosophical argument. This isn't scientific, although they like to infuse science in that we are just material. And your brain state, your mind is a brain state. Your brain is physical matter that is determined by material things. Your brain state is a biological state. Biological state is a physical state. Therefore, it's determined by physics. Well, sure. Well, sure.
When you listen to the smooth talking or a scientist or someone talking about it, it could give you.
Well, and look, at the end of the day, most scientists legitimately are in the pursuit of truth. They really are. They think that they are. That's their motivation. That's what I'm trying to tell you. That now where they end up can be misguided, and there can be some false equivalencies like philosophy and science. Which interesting. I've got a quote on that from Stephen Hawking here in a moment. Go ahead.
was I gonna say?
That's the question.
There's, I mean, there's the science side of it. I mean, science is a pure thought process. And I don't think there's any conspiracy in science to disprove the Bible necessarily. There may be individuals that set it out to do that. But the process of scientific thinking is not, the purpose of that is not to disprove our beliefs.
100%.
And we shouldn't really look at them. Albert Einstein, he was a Jewish guy. And I don't think he ever denied the existence of God. And certainly in the end, and his work was not for that process, for that reason. His work was to just in search of mathematical and physical explanations.
You're exactly right. Well, and in the end, his work really did get him to consider that there is a God. Now, whether or not he actually did any action upon that, I don't think we really know. But you're exactly right, and that's a great example. Is that he is an authority. Look, we still use his work today. There's a lot based on his work, and his work is sound. And that's the problem sometimes, is that science gave us this. This is an incredible piece of machinery that helps us do things. Most people couldn't live without this very long, either by work or entertainment, whatever. Science gave you this. Therefore, listen to us about the science of where you came from, the science of things unobserved. There's a false equivalency sometimes, and we are charged to call in question, use that same skepticism, say, okay, what's the data? Okay. And really let's define what we're talking about, because semantically we can get in trouble sometimes. Like you said, that smooth talk can get you in trouble a little bit, right? Well, I don't. Listen, I think the reason why I can't spell anymore, auto check. Okay. Auto spell. See, I can't even say it right. Anyways, so I know we're running out of time. I want to move through this just a little bit. Okay. So Professor Francis Crick, I don't know if any of you have heard of him before, but he was one of the leading minds in the 20th century scientists. You, your joys and your sorrows, your memories and your ambitions, your sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. Who you are is nothing more than a pack of neurons. It's kind of what we were just discussing. I mean, this is the belief. I'm going to move on. Richard Dawkins, this actually came from an interview, and I've watched the interview. If you want to watch it fully, I didn't include all of the quote, but I think it's important to note what he said right before this. But he says, I have a materialist view of the world. I think that things are determined in a rational way by antecedent events, and that commits me to the view that when I think I have free will, when I think I am exercising free choice, I am deluding myself. My brain states are determined by physical events. Now, he was being questioned. He was in an interview. And when he was asked if we have free will, you know what he said? He said, I must admit, I don't like that question because I'm torn on the answer. But when forced in a corner, this is what he said. And you know what book he wrote? The God Delusion. I wonder if he should write a book about free will delusion. Because he says that when I think I'm exercising free choice, I'm deceiving myself. I'm falling into a delusion myself. I'm sorry, somebody raised their, yes.
I didn't get baptized until last year.
Okay.
So, without free will, I mean, what made me decide to get baptized and decide that I do want to follow God and I do want to change my life?
Well, and if you ask them, they're just going to say all of your past experiences of the outside world that you had nothing to do with and other people, and literally your brain chemistry led you to do this. Now, I don't think that that's actually what happened. When we actually have dilemmas, when we're sitting there thinking, I don't know what to do. How many times have you had an option between a few things and say, well, if I choose this, then X, Y, and Z occurs. And those are good things. But if I don't do this, all these bad things are going to happen. Okay, we got a hand.
I'm just curious, so you might have already pointed out this connection. So people with this particular viewpoint,
Hmm.
how do they think of law and order? Because if there's, if there's no right or wrong,
It's necessary.
free will,
It's just necessary.
but who decides that?
Well, it's just been determined. I mean, and I'm not trying to be snarky here. I mean, that's literally, I think, really how they would answer. I don't necessarily put words in their mouth, but that's what you would have to say. That's what you'd have to say. And they do freely admit, and Richard Dawkins has said this, has written down, that getting rid of religion is dangerous, which is an interesting thing for him to say. It's not that he's a...
Prayer out of school is dangerous.
Well, sure, there's a lot of things that's happening in schools that are dangerous, but the idea that there's a moral code that we need to live by, he sees the importance of it. It's not that he thinks there's a God out there, because he doesn't, but he sees the value of people working together, having a moral saying, hey, that's a good thing to do. You do the good thing and stay away from this bad thing over here. Because if you do this bad thing, it's going to really mess up the whole system. But in their worldview, you cannot justify it. You can't justify real morality. Are we already? Is this? No. Guys, how did this happen? Okay, stick with me for just a second. You won't have me next week, I promise. But I've got to read you this next one. Okay, Stephen Hawking. Okay, I know I've talked about him before, but this really gets back to what you were saying, and I really want to make this point. So this is a quote from his book, The Grand Design. Recent experiments in neuroscience support the view that our physical brain, following the known laws of science that determines our actions, and are not some agency that exists outside those laws. For example, the study of patients undergoing awake brain surgery found that by electrically stimulating the appropriate regions of the brain, one could create in the patient the desire to move the hand, arm, or foot, or to move the lips and talk. It is hard to imagine how free will can operate if our behavior is determined by physical law. So it seems that we are no more than biological machines, and that free will is just an illusion. Now, what's really interesting is that just a few pages beforehand, he makes the statement, philosophy is dead. Science has killed philosophy. Very interesting statement, because you know what else he said in this book? He asked the question, do we really have a reason to believe in objective reality? What a philosophical question to ask. You know what science can't prove? That he's not a brain in a vat of chemicals being stimulated right now, and that he's kind of in a matrix situation. Literally, he can't prove that. So on that worldview, you can't know that you're really in real life. That's what he means by asking this question. Do we really have a reason to believe that an objective reality exists? He keeps buzzing that. I'm sorry, guys. We can know as Christians, how do we know we have free will? That's kind of the takeaway for us. Because I think if you have the conversation with most, and again, I think I ran off whoever that was not, I need to go find her. But if we have free will, how do we show that to others? So right here, if we get to the Great Commission, what does it establish? When we look at Matthew 28, 18 through 20, there are facts to be believed, commands to be obeyed, promises to be embraced, and potential destiny to be avoided. All of those things don't happen unless we have the ability to choose ourselves. We have been given a soul. That's the big difference. We believe we have a soul, do we not? That we have a portion of God within us. There's the major factors that, I don't doubt that if you opened up my brain and you poked on it, I'd have some responses. but you're still not poking my soul, my decision making. This conscience that we have is given to us. And I think that if we're honest with ourselves, we know that to be the case. And simply, like she said, the answer is simple. Getting there may be difficult, especially with folks that believe purely in materialistic type means. Now, the question is, here's the other thing about this. And in James chapter 5, verse 19, I want to turn there very quickly because this is important. James chapter 5, very last verse here, verses, "My brothers, if anyone among you wanders from the truth and someone brings him back, let him know that whoever brings back a sinner from his wandering will save a soul from death and will cover a multitude of sins." This means that we can become a Christian. We can wander and we can fall. And we can come back. There are some within the Christian realms, Christian sects that believe that's all predestined by God. Now, I have a whole study on Calvinism and the tulip doctrine and everything. If that's something you are interested in and would like to dive into at some point, let me know because I can do that as well. But we'll end there because I'm already 6 minutes over. Sorry, guys. If you have any comments or questions or you want to tell me how mean I am, that's totally fine right afterwards. But let's say a prayer and we'll get out of class. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for giving us a portion of you, giving us a soul, giving us the ability to have free will, to choose to do your will. We chose to be here this morning, and we're so glad that we have been here with you and in and amongst brothers and sisters. Lord, help us to be shining lights. Help us to be the examples that you would have us to be. Help us to be the good servant that is consistently trying to better ourselves for you. Lord, I pray that you be with all those who've been mentioned today that need your help in any shape or form. Lord, again, help us to be good stewards of all the things that you've given us because you've given us much. We're so truly blessed. Lord, we're most thankful for your Son, the amazing sacrifice he gave, and everything that we have access to through it. We ask this all in Jesus' most high, holy, and amazing name. Amen.